But how did you communicate the added value that you could bring coming from outside the sport?
Look, it's a great question because one of the things that I'm always clear on is what my USP is. And when you move from sport to sport, your USP is clearly not being a technical, credible expert within that sport itself. Okay, it's pretty cliche, but my expertise now is building and creating sporting systems. I guess that would be a little bit of a strap line. The move I made into gymnastics, which had never had a performance director before. I think the idea of a performance director going into a sport like gymnastics was probably something that was not well received anyway. The thought of it then being somebody that knew nothing about gymnastics, and my gymnastics knowledge was pretty darn thin, was probably something that was a bit of shock and horror for some people. But you know what? Look, I never professed to be a gymnastics expert in the same way as I don't profess to be a diving expert in the role that I currently do now.
Right. All right, folks, well, welcome to today's episode of the Supporting Champions podcast. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Tim Jones, Associate Performance Director at British Swimming. Now, Tim is a former Olympic swimmer, and he's held numerous leadership roles across high-performance sport in swimming, athletics and gymnastics, to name a few, and coached numerous top-level athletes and athletes through their development pathway. So in Tim, we have someone who's been there and done it as an athlete, coach, sporting developer, and director. Tim, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Steve. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Now, Tim, what I didn't mention in your introduction there was that you weren't just an elite swimmer, that you happened to compete in the most hardcore of events, the 200-metre butterfly. that event is a different level, isn't it?
Hey, Steve, look, you make some pragmatic choices, I think, in your athletic career, and I'd love to have been a 50-metre sprinter, to be honest with you, but the reality was I wasn't very good at it. And I think certainly in swimming, I assume it's the same in most sports, is that you eventually sort of funnel your energies and your talent into the areas where you probably think you could be quite good. Unfortunately for me, it was 200-metre butterfly, which it was brutal, and I had a level of talent, but I had to work hard. It didn't come particularly easy to me, but I probably stayed the course, to be honest with you. So I look back at the athletes that I raced when I was young, and there were plenty that were better than me, but there weren't too many that managed to stay the course, and I did that. And I swam for. I think I retired when I was 24, which was which was back in the early 90s. That was probably becoming one of the older athletes. We've seen a very different world now with the support that our athletes get through the lottery and national governing bodies. But at that time, it was a point in time where I needed to earn some money, to be honest with you, Steve.
Right, okay.
And I was realistic as well. So and probably a trait that I've taken with me into my sort of administration career and coaching career, which is that I've always been a realist, and some people would say too realistic, don't dream enough, but I knew that I wasn't going to get any better. I knew that I just wasn't good enough to be a medalist at the top of the world. I was good, but just not that good. Again, pragmatic decision at the point in time where I was thinking to myself, do I want to do this anymore? Do I want to be on the merry-go-round, or actually am I happy to call time and move off in a different direction?
Interesting. So 24. That sounds really early now that we in modern day comparisons. But was that normal back then? How were you supporting yourself to train and compete then?
So it was the bank of mum and dad. That was
Right.
that was part of it. Towards the latter sort of years that I competed, I'd started to work. So I'd taken on a part-time job actually within the sports development department, Birmingham City Council, which was hosting the swimming training scheme that I was a part of. But there's a slightly different age profile, age hotspot for each event, and certainly the type of tough endurance event that I was involved in.
Yeah.
You didn't tend to see athletes that were continuing in those events into the mid-20s. It was a little bit of a younger person's type event, and even in the swimming disciplines now, you tend to see that. There's some events which tend to still favour some of the younger athletes. There are people that defy that trend, but 24 was a reasonable age and a reasonable point in time to say, Tim, you need to cut your life in a different direction and go make some money.
Yeah. Okay. And so. Can you look back now? I mean, you've worked in so many different systems. Is there an element where you're looking at the support, the insight, the performance advantage of sophisticated support systems, the coaching methods these days? Do you look back and think, oh damn, if I could have had a bit of that, I could have gone up a little notch at all, or gone Barcelona in '92, or whatever the next step that you were pragmatically assessing whether to go for or not?
Yeah, I think I made a decision to not want to continue pretty close to the trial event for Barcelona. So it was kind of 6 weeks out, and I just woke up one morning and thought, I just don't want to do this. I just don't. I don't really feel as though my heart's in it. I don't feel as though I'm going to be any better this time round, which was a pretty late call to make. I'd committed 3.5 years of a cycle. But I've got a pretty strong gut feel. Anybody that knows me well knows I've got a strong opinion, and my strong opinion of myself was,
right,
look, be true to yourself, Tim, and you're not doing this for the right reasons. So stop. Call it out, call yourself out. And I did, and the decision was made in a short period of time, and I met my coach, and that was it. And my life went in a different direction very, very quickly. But to answer your question, Steve, look, I have nothing but respect for the people that looked after me, and I was very fortunate in my athletic journey, because probably by luck rather than design, I managed to work with some exceptionally good people, and I learnt an awful lot from those good people. Do I think our training methodologies were a long way behind where we're at today? I don't think that's the case at all. But the support package was very, very different. So I could very easily critique what we did as a swimming program. What is it? 30 something years ago, 36 years ago now, and I think it would still stand the test of time. But it was without the support of all the support services. And it was without the benefit of available finance as well, and ultimately it's the available finance, it's the opportunities for camps and competitions, it's the outstanding support provision now that we can package around athletes that makes the difference. And for me, that has been the big gain.
And you allude to the programme standing the test of time. What do you look back at there? Is that a you've got to swim a lot and you've got to put the work in. You've got to. What are the training principles that you're seeing now that were there previously that you were doing in the 80s?
Yeah, so the last coach that I worked with was for any length of time was a guy called Rick Bailey. So Rick was the head of sports development. At Birmingham City Council. He was also the head Olympic coach in 1984, Olympic swimming coach. He came and started a program in Birmingham, and we were working at that point in time. We were working, sort of full-blooded training cycles. This wasn't a case of turn up the pool and what should we do now. This was very sophisticated. We'd started to do work around lactate testing and that type of stuff. So even at that stage, then the theory behind the sequencing of workouts and weeks and months across the season was incredibly well thought through. It gave me a terrific grounding for me to then move pretty quickly into my coaching career. So from that perspective, hey, look, there's some nuanced changes now around sequencing, and there's different terminology now to what we used to use. But
same stuff rebranded.
Absolutely. But look, the theory that sat behind it, whilst the theory might have shifted slightly, then I think we were a long way ahead of the curve, to be honest with you, even the back end of my career.
Mm. And so was that the next step for you? Once you'd retired, you were able to begin coaching, or did you have to work and coach to sort of carve that career in swimming in what was, I guess, still at the time, a fairly amateur or certainly unpaid network?
Yeah, look, I probably got lucky, Steve.
Right.
You know, look, there's always the argument you make your own luck, but look, I turned up on a day in 1992 and said I don't want to swim anymore. The guy that was coaching me at the time, Barry Prime, he said I'm going to book you onto a coaching course, and within 2 weeks I was on a coaching course and doing some of my significant coaching badges in that type of lingo. So you know, I was a pretty well qualified on paper coach within quite a short period of time, probably within 12 months or so. The work that I've been doing in the last 12 months of my swimming career was sort of sports administration work. It was supporting the swimming program. It wasn't coaching at all, but literally within 3 or 4 weeks of me stopping being an athlete in the water, I was a coach on the poolside within the Birmingham program. And again, probably not really by design, but there was a turnover of staff within the Birmingham program, and 12 months down the line, I was coaching the best athletes in the City of Birmingham program, which included an Olympic medalist. So I'd gone from in the pool with a group of athletes to pretty much being the person that was on the pool side, leading that group of athletes, which was. Hey, look, it was a brilliant opportunity, but it was not easy, because you go through a process then of having to reinvent yourself as not being somebody that's a mate and a friend and a peer. Yeah. You're somebody that's charged with setting direction, and hey, I enjoyed it, but I was flying by the seat of my pants to start off with. I'll be the first one to say that.
What were some of the big lessons early on in your coaching career?
Look, the big lessons have probably stayed with me all the way through, Steve, which is, look, from a theory point of view, I felt I was pretty strong. I kind of had a really good radar at that point in time as to what I thought was right and what I didn't think was right in terms of how to develop athletes. I probably would have been called arrogant. I didn't read an awful lot of books early doors. I kind of wanted to, and I purposely did that, I just wanted to test my own kind of theory as to what I thought would work well and what wouldn't work well. Where I was incredibly naive was around man management,
right.
And working with people and getting the best out of people as people and not as athletes or performers.
Yeah, okay.
So that's been a big area of growth for me. So that's something I would put my hand on my heart and say I was incredibly naive about. But look, you live and learn. I had a first international representation with a junior team as a coach within 12 months, and within 2 years of starting coaching, I was one of the Commonwealth Games staff, one of the the selected staff for the 1994 Victoria Commonwealth Games. And again, within 4 years of starting coaching, I was one of the the official Olympic team coaches, which at 29 is probably still one of the younger swimming coaches there's ever been on the team.
Yeah.
So my learning curve was pretty steep.
Yeah.
But my first major, games, Commonwealth Games, then the group of swimmers I had won 7 medals. So I wasn't doing too badly at that stage.
No, sure.
In fact, arguably, it didn't get any better than that for some reason.
To lose some of that man management skill.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
But what? So that's interesting in itself. If you had success, if you had medals, that's normally, but that can be an excuse for not having the man management skills. What was the stimulus for you to review those man management skills, that emotional intelligence? Was it a mentor? Was it feedback from athletes? Was it your own personal reflection? What was the stimulus for that?
The early success probably was the signal for me to not learn enough quickly enough. If I look back and reflect 30 years down the line, maybe there was a sense that I thought I'd got the formula and I didn't need to work too hard at it. I've always been a hard worker, but maybe there was something lodged in there. I think the whole management issue that was something that probably played out again after a result that wasn't quite as positive as I wanted it to be. And I'm the first one to admit I inherited an incredibly good group of swimmers when I started coaching. And I take little credit for some of those early results, although I was part of the journey. I suppose by the time I was 3-4 years in, then I kind of felt like I needed to own those results a little bit more. And some of them were good. Some of them were not what I wanted. And I had an experience in 1996 with 2 or 3 athletes, and did I get anything that I really wanted? Probably not, really. We had some decent performances, but it was not what I was aspiring to. So I learnt a significant lesson then, and I'd also been offered and committed to a new job as well in the run up to the Atlanta Games. And again, look, in hindsight, I can look at it as 2 sides of a coin. On the one hand, look, it was a really positive next career step for me to take. Was it a distraction at the time? Look, it probably could have been, Steve. I was appointed to a role in November 1995 and didn't take it up until August 1996. So I kind of had a long sort of period of time just working through how I was going to operate in the next role whilst I'd still got business to deal with in my current role.
Mm. And what was the transition from coaching to, as you sort of termed it, sports administration, but it would be directing programs. It would be, I guess, the person overseeing programs. What was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's so I did take another coaching role in Edinburgh for 7 years after I left Birmingham, and again, I'd always had a sense with the role in Birmingham that I was just the caretaker in a sort of a long line of successful coaches that had run that program, and I was really keen to you know what, I need to do something where I start with a blank sheet of paper and I need to construct it myself and see whether I have the ability to construct it myself. So that's what Edinburgh was. It was a blank sheet of paper. It was a new program. It was a new role, and we had some good success there. The move into sports administration was I guess a time in my life kind of decision. There were two factors there, Steve. So factor number one, I guess, was that the facility we were operating out of, there was a concern that it was going to close. It was a historic building which needed a refurb. It would have taken a multiple number of years, as it ended up taking, and to lose a significant training base for me was too big a compromise than I was prepared to take. But look, there were two personal aspects around the decision as well. One is I'd got a young daughter, so I was married, and I've got a 3-year-old daughter at the time, who I literally wasn't seeing from Sunday to Sunday. The nature of swimming coaching, tends to be that you're up and out early, you're back in late, and all the times that my daughter was up and awake, I was away and working. And after 3 years, that was starting to take its toll. And I also felt that coaching was probably a little bit of a career cul-de-sac that I wasn't sure at that time I knew the way of getting out of. So I was a pretty successful coach. By that stage, I'd have done 2 Olympic Games as team staff, and was expected to be the staff on the third consecutive games. But I couldn't see my way out of. So where does this move to next? Do I feel like I want to be a poolside swimming coach for the next 20, 30 years of my life? I just couldn't see that happening as much as I enjoyed being a coach. So it was a case of waiting for the first opportunity to come along, and that was there was actually as the sort of the performance director for Scottish Swimming, which again I was pretty young at the time. I think I was what would have been 30, 35, 36. So I was not.
What sort of year would this have been? So I can anchor it in terms of lottery funding and so on.
Yeah, so lottery funding had come in. We were now into 2003, so we were probably 5-6 years into that. There was a little bit more money in the sport to enable us to put better programs in place. I wouldn't suggest that the coaching roles had got any sort of better paid. It was the support we could package around that it improved. And then I made a terminally bad or terminally good decision, I guess, depending on which way you look at it. I chose to apply for a role with Scottish Swimming. I was successful in it, and 2 weeks later, I think it was, one of my athletes won a silver medal at the World Championships, and I was encouraged to continue to coach at the same time as operating as the performance director. And if I'm honest with you, Steve, that just didn't work. It didn't work for me personally. I was always trying to be in 2 places at once. It probably didn't work as well as it could have done for the athletes, because they probably felt like they were compromised by somebody who was just tired and chasing the tail all the time. And my first experience as being a performance lead was probably just not what I was looking for. I can look at myself and be harsh and go, you shouldn't have done that. But my intent was good. It was a good intent. I knew the direction I wanted to go, but I was probably encouraged to just take a little bit of a left turn for 12 months, which was not a great decision.
And this is a big question, so apologies in advance, but during that time, from the early 90s through to now, swimming has been through radical changes. I mean, it's had its ups and downs. It's had regime changes that have made sort of front page headlines, as well as extraordinary successes too. What's your reflection of the choppy waters in the pool over that time?
Yeah, I mean, it's look, we operated as a very amateur national team, but with great intent for a long period of time in the pre-lottery era. We had our first performance director in the late Derek Snelling, who was very much from the master coach type of mould of performance director. As was the guy Bill Sweetman that succeeded him. Bill was, I think, in post for probably about 6 years. I was around for probably the first 4 or 5 years of that, still in the sport. Then there was a period of time that that I wasn't involved in swimming. That was probably a 7 or 8 year period in total, and again a different type of performance leader in Michael Scott, who I knew as a contemporary, but not as something that I worked closely with in aquatics. And then sort of the current Aquatics GB British Swimming sort of hierarchy that we run with now, which again there's been a fairly nuanced change in the past couple of years, but certainly we've seen a really significant about turn in results from what we were typically getting, which was we go to an Olympic Games and win 1, 2 really good games for us would be 3 medals. London wasn't the success that the sport was hoping for, and that signalled some significant change in leadership. I came into role as head of elite development, Bill Furness as the head coach, and Chris Spice as the performance director, and that's what we ran with for probably 8-9 years, I think it was, before the most recent changes.
And can you pick out any major shifts, whether it's philosophical or programmatic, that you think have steadied swimming's performance levels as well as cultural and systemic over that time?
Look, I think I can talk obviously with a great deal of depth around the past period of time post London. And look, there's always been a sense with swimmers in Britain that we've always produced some really, really great swimmers. We just went through a really long period of time where we just couldn't get those swimmers to convert potentially into performance on that given day. And of course, those of us that operate in the Olympic and World Championship environment, it's all about your ability to produce a performance at a given time and a given date. And we knew that we'd got some good swimmers even in 2012, but we just hadn't been able to unlock the keys to the cupboard to those on the day performances. So a lot of the work that took place, certainly in the first 3 or 4 years, was about how do we change the structure of the sport? How do we work with our athletes and coaches to unlock that performance when it matters?
Can you give me any clues as to? I'm not looking for names or whatever it might be, but what were the things that perhaps weren't there that prevented some of the performances from actually yielding at the games?
Okay, so look, a couple of examples, Steve. So look, from a purely development point of view, we operated a competition calendar through all of the sort of the age group years, whereby arguably you were rewarded for producing a performance, but you could do it whenever you wanted to. So to qualify for the national championships, which were for age groupers at the back end of the season, you could post a qualifying time pretty much at any meet of a certain standard for the preceding 8-9 months. That probably didn't make a lot of sense, because what that did was that just kind of that just added fuel to this concept that you can create great swimmers, but they weren't necessarily any better at that given moment. So
right. From
an age point of view, then we created what was called a qualifying window. It still creates a lot of noise now as to whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. But the philosophy behind it in the early days was we wanted a really small window where coaches could spend time with their athletes early season developing their athletes, but then they had a really short period of time where they had to produce a performance over about a 6 or 8 week period. Probably meant in reality they could probably sort of race 2 or 3 times. And that was what then unlocked the back end of the season opportunities. And we produced an awful lot of statistics. We looked at which programs, which coaches were really good at getting swimmers to be good or good enough in this sort of the April window sort of period, but then better when it really mattered at the back end of the season. So the whole structure. One of the things I first did when I came back to swimming was to literally turn the competition structure. Most people would say upside down. So it was a big piece of work to negotiate with the home nations and the coaching association at the time to make that a big structural change to the domestic calendar, which is what we've continued to run with. Since then, we've made some tweaks, we've learned some lessons, but that was important for us. You need to be good in April, because that's typically when we have our senior trial event as well, but you need to be better at the back end of the season when the major championships take place. So that was one area. The other area was we did a lot of work actually with the senior team themselves and the coaching staff around arena skills. So again, one of my lessons from 2012 when I led the gymnastics team as team leader is that we got good at using the crowd, the home crowd, as a real positive force in our performance. So it was a performance assistance. When again looking at the sidelines, it just kind of felt as though for the swimmers at that time, there was a weight of the world on their shoulders, which meant they just couldn't quite get the best out of themselves when it really mattered.
So some interesting reflections there. And so that if I could just ask you about that scheduling, that change, that sounds as though it constrains, but it also relieves the program. It constrains it as in we need you to be focused and performing here. So that focuses the mind, but it also puts an objective to the program, but also relieving the program in the sense that I would imagine that offers opportunities for innovation. If somebody has to develop aspects of their physical characteristics or their technique, there's an opportunity there where the pressure is off slightly, that they're able to experiment or lay the foundations for that peak to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And the challenge when you can qualify for events through the whole course of the season is that look, swimming clubs are an eclectic mix of big, large city programs, some funded by the governing body, and some very small operations that are having some real challenges at the moment around the costs of facilities. One of the constraints was let's not allow people to qualify for major national events early in the season. Let's dedicate a period of time for coaches to be able to learn and grow and develop their athletes. The flip side of the coin is, again, and it comes back to the pragmatic approach, is that a lot of swimming clubs have to earn money to keep themselves afloat, and the way they earn money is by running swimming competitions. So whilst I can look at a purist and go, that was the right thing to do for the senior British team that was competing at a World or a European or a Commonwealth Games or a Olympic Games. Was that something that necessarily helped all of the swimming club fraternity? I'm not sure it did, Steve.
Right.
And that's the balance that we all continue to run. As a business, Aquatics GB, we are just high performance, so we're not a membership organisation. We're not involved in club programs, that type of thing per se. That's our home nation association. So the driver was very much the mission and the vision of British Aquatics GB as we now are.
And coming on to those arena skills, did this relate not just to the athletes but also the coaches and support staff in terms of managing the pressure of the competitions? Because in the lead up to games as we are at the moment, it's head down and focusing, and then it becomes circus management. What was the focus for the whole team?
Yeah, so look, we British Swimming employed a former British Lion rugby player, Nigel Redmond. So he came in as a head of performance team development, and we did a lot of work around how we develop our coaches. And this was not technical development at all. This was all around the soft skills, the ability to work as a team, how we stay connected, how we communicate, how we keep ourselves fresh, how we reinforce messages that, for some athletes that might start competing on the last day of competition, that is their day one of the competition, and we need to be as fresh on day 9 as we are on literal day one of the competition. So a huge amount of work, but with a very, very small group of coaches. So this wasn't a wide-ranging program in terms of numbers. This was an incredibly focused program, which was just looking at a cohort of coaches, which was probably only around about a dozen.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And that continues today. That work in terms of the focus of we need to get games ready from a tapering and peaking point of view, but also games ready in terms of our coaching mindset.
It does. It's probably, I don't think we've taken our eye off the ball. We've as all governing bodies, we've had to make some decisions, Steve.
Right.
You know, the level of resource that we have available is not increasing. So we're always looking at where is our best bang for our buck, so to speak. So Nigel left the business a good number of years ago now, probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm probably missing a year or two there. Have we found the right replacement for Nigel as yet? We probably haven't. And again, we tend to be fairly practical in that, you know, we don't necessarily replace posts for replacing posts' sake. We need to find the right person to slot into posts. So I think we'll at the start of the next cycle we'll review that. Nigel's work was, as I said, it was non-technical at all, and I think sort of we went through a period of time of feeling as though we did a great piece of work around soft skills, arena skills. Is there a piece of work that we now need to do to reinforce some technical skills? Absolutely, we do. And again, if I look across our sports and my involvement now in swimming is fairly passing, to be honest with you. I said as part of our world-class leadership team, but my day-to-day work is not swimming at all. So all of our sports are at different stages of evolution. I currently lead strategically lead the diving program, the Olympic diving program, and the para swimming program. The Olympic diving program, as an example, is an incredibly strong program from a technical perspective. You know, it is, you know, technical skills, skill chains, skill building is something that the coaching group are incredibly strong at. We probably spent less time with that group, as an example, working soft skills, but you know, that's something that we'll put on the table for the next cycle and decide which way we want to go with that group. And
I'm conscious that I've probably skipped over some really interesting aspects of your journey. You've had opportunities to step out of the swimming bubble. I mean, swimming, I suppose, is to a certain degree a number of sports, isn't it, really? Let's be fair. And you've got similar experiences of working in multi-sport sports like athletics and gymnastics. And firstly, how was it stepping into that environment as a swimmer or as an outsider? But also, what are the trends and the differences that you see that you can kind of take back into swimming?
Yeah, so I'd spent once I'd moved into sports administration, Steve. Again, life sometimes gets in the way of career, and I chose to make some personal decisions. We were living in Scotland as a family. I got another child that had arrived, and we wanted a different type of support network. So we moved back down south. Initially, it wasn't a strong career move for me to make, but I chose to leave swimming in 2006. I think it was early 2006. The role that I was doing at the time, it kind of felt it was going to be restructured. It wasn't something that really floated my boat at all, and I saw it as an opportunity to leave the business. I was made redundant from the business, but it was an opportunity to actually to learn about how to develop athletes, but outside of the aquatics lens. So. As you know, I took a role at UK Athletics, which unfortunately I was only there for a couple of years, and my role changed a couple of times. I came into the business as a senior performance manager. I think structurally it was at the time, and then quite quickly the business at the time moved towards a series of high performance centres, high packs, and I ran the Loughborough high pack for 12 months, which was terrific. I probably learnt more in the 2 years that I was at track and field than I probably have ever learnt. I was probably more uncomfortable in those 2 years than in any role that I've undertaken. I don't think I slept for the first 6 months, to be honest with you.
I was going to say, I don't remember. Obviously, that's where we crossed paths, most notably, but also it didn't feel like 12 months or 2 years. It felt like you were there a lot longer, and I would say that it didn't look like you were sleep deprived.
No, so I mean, it was. I got a call. I'd only been in the business for 18 months when somebody suggested there was a role at gymnastics that they'd be interested in me applying for. So it really was from in the door to out the door. It was literally 2 years tops. But like I said, a really enjoyable couple of years, and some really enduring sort of friendships from that period of time as well. But I learnt a lot. Swimming as a sport, because of the age demographic and the way the sport is structured, which is in clubs, in blocks of training time, which is almost dictated by pool providers. Then it is highly structured, and athletes to a certain extent conform within that because of the training constraints that we had. Track and field was just very different to me because there seemed a lot less constraints as far as that was concerned. There were a lot more single athlete coach pair partnerships, and the need to be individually in my approach and in the sports approach was something I'd probably not experienced before.
Right, interesting. And what was the play? What was the pitch? I mean, if you're being tapped on the shoulder, maybe a slightly different dynamic. You don't have to make the case for yourself. But how did you communicate the added value that you could bring coming from outside the sport?
Look, it's a great question because one of the things that I'm always clear on is what my USP is. And when you move from sport to sport, your USP is clearly not being a technical, credible expert within that sport itself. It's a pretty cliche, but my expertise now is building and creating sporting systems. I guess that would be a little bit of a strap line. The move I made into gymnastics, which had never had a performance director before. I think the idea of a performance director going into a sport like gymnastics was probably something that was not well received anyway. The thought of it then being somebody that knew nothing about gymnastics, and my gymnastics knowledge was pretty darn thin, was probably something that was a bit of shock and horror for some people. But you know what? Look, I never professed to be a gymnastics expert in the same way as I don't profess to be a diving expert in the role that I currently do now. Right. I've got a little bit more credibility as a swimming coach, so I can pull that off a little bit more in the swimming disciplines.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I suppose that if you've coached swimming in a straight line, whether it's butterfly or breaststroke, then there's going to be some natural overlap. But yeah, you take the leap. That's probably a bit too of a cliche, but take the leap into diving. Sorry, that's terrible. But if you were to say, oh yeah, my expertise of jumping in a pool and performing in a pool environment cuts across to diving and possibly para. I suppose that those same questions that you might be asking of a steeplechaser, shot putter, a gymnast, they're going to be the same sort of questions that are going to develop the coach, develop the person, develop the athletes, develop the system. Is that something that you've got a sense of what are the fundamentals that you'd be looking for a program, regardless of whatever sport it might be?
Look. I think probably one of the common threads through all of the sports that I've worked with is they've typically been sports with relatively early specialisation.
Okay.
And so look, the age demographic is been relatively similar. And in each of my sports, it's been a case of these aren't sports that you can go out and do on your own out in the big wide world. They're highly structured in that the coach is always present. The coach is is probably a strong leading force. The dynamic between coach and athlete obviously changes as the experience of the athlete changes as well. But it's certainly that structurally the sports I've worked in have been quite similar. Embarked in a piece of work, or probably 8 or 9 years ago, and I'd written a very high level development strategy for swimming. It was when I started, and kind of made a couple of statements which I sort of I wanted to stay true to, but I didn't quite know what I was going to do, and it was all around. It was kind of the old concept of long-term athlete development, and I'd kind of bought into that as at a level, but I hadn't bought into it as a coach fully, and I felt there was a different way of putting the long-term athlete development message out there. We ended up creating a piece of work called the Optimal Athlete Development Framework in swimming, which looked very much at the characteristics and attributes of people that come into the sport, so the person, the athletes that are in the training pool as to how we want to develop them, and then the performer, which was all about what happens in the arena. And this has been out there now for probably 7-8 years. So I'd like to think that we were fairly ahead of the curve in terms of our thinking in how we were rolling this out, and we've now got a document, some guiding principles, which is more of a framework for coaches rather than a set of A, B, C sequencing, coach by numbers type of tool, which I never really sort of bought into at all.
And what was different? The optimal athlete development pathway, if that was a bit of a manifesto from you, what was different between before and what you wanted to see?
It felt to me as though before there was a single route, so there was a lane on the motorway, and it felt to me as though that unless you were driving on that lane, then your chances of being successful were limited. And I guess philosophically, and very much through all the experience I've had across sports, which is, hey, look, there's lots of different ways of doing high performance here. So there's not wrong ways, there's not right ways, but there are things that you probably wouldn't need to do if you're then going to get a level of success. So in swimming terms, what wouldn't you do? You wouldn't do a lot of high intensity anaerobic work with young athletes. Let's keep it simple. What you would do is you do a lot of technique development and low end aerobic development as well. So just simple stuff like that. We still tend to see that those athletes that have been overextended with a lot of anaerobic work at an early age, those tend to be the ones that plateau at an earlier age as well. So,
and would you see them? Would you see them going fast early?
We have a history of kids going fast early, but
that's not whether it's if that was the input, that lots of anaerobic work was getting kids fast early, but it was leading to plateaus later. Was that the equation that you were working with?
It was. Look, age group swimming coaching. I don't think I'm being controversial. It's not a difficult equation. You can get a kid good as an age group swimming coach by swimming them for a lot of hours and swimming them hard. So intensity plus volume will give you a really great result at a young age. Do we see that being sustainable long term? No, we don't. That's the typical burnout we see had typically seen with athletes that were great at an early age, that could win titles at European and World Junior level, but then just couldn't ever transition to the next stage of their career.
And what was the communication from you if you're leading that and you're trying to create the case for that because for a lot of coaches, every month or year, there is the currency of their effectiveness is their swimmers' times. How are you able to break that short-term thinking, almost dogmatic thinking, and think more about the swimmer's long-term development?
Well, I don't think we have necessarily completely, Steve. Look, we worked hard at it. We've done we did some big launches. We promoted the philosophy. We changed the competition structure. So you constrain what a coach is working within or to, and that will ultimately make a change to behaviours. But look, one of the challenges of the system that we have now is that we have a number of performance centres that operate as part of Aquatics GB. And look, it will be lovely to think that everybody follows this development path of doing this, followed by this, and all of the coaching inputs and support science inputs are credited for the great work that they do. But the reality of our system still is that it's the people that is in receipt of the athlete at the end of the journey that tend to get the most credit. And we lose sight of all the great work that's happened beforehand. So do we need to find better ways of recognising coaches that have been part of a journey? Absolutely we do. Do we still have coaches that will want to get the most out of the athletes in that moment? Of course we do. Do systems around the world, and we see them in different countries, reward coaches for junior performance? Yes, they do, and then again, those athletes don't ever transition on to being great seniors. So there's no easy solution to this. We've tried to do it by education and support, and suggesting that we are not going to tell everybody to coach in the same way, and to provide just this framework. But look, we haven't got it right. Steve, not all of it right anyway.
Yeah, interesting. And so, right, we're a month away from Paris. What's on your agenda besides taking the time? I mean, that's luxury, taking the time out to have a chat. But what's on your agenda as part of the performance director team, and what's still in play, still to be done over the next 4 weeks or so before the Olympics start? And then I guess there's no let up for you either, because you've got an Olympic and Paralympic strand to your remit. Yes. Talk me through the Olympic stuff, and then how do you survive and continue maintaining yourself through to the Paras?
Yeah, so in practical terms, we will go into camp on the 14th of July with the Olympic diving team, and we have a period of time in camp before we move. We have a great team. We qualified a full set of quota places. So diving is a sport where you have to qualify quota places. We have 11 divers that are going, and we have quite a good number of very realistic medal opportunities, which is what they are. The games will take me through to the end of the first week in. First week and a half in August. I'll have a week at home, and then I go into camp with the para team. So I team lead the Olympic diving team, and then I team lead the para swimming team. And what's this period of time like? It's about trying to find enough time to be able to spend with two very different sports, two very different groups of high performance athletes, and two very separate staffing teams as well. So it's a time management, an effort management equation and conundrum for me as much as anything. I'll come out of the Paralympic Games. I guess the end of the first week in September, work for a few weeks, and then I'm taking the whole of October off, out the country, phone off to regenerate and I guess make some decisions on what the next part of the journey is.
Yeah, amazing that you've got that insight too, because I think sometimes the recovery aspect is often neglected until people are post games. But what's your leadership philosophy going into a competition? What's your kind of key responsibilities for the coaches, for the athletes, the support staff?
Okay, so look structurally in each of the teams, I have a small leadership team. So I will have somebody that takes responsibility for coaching, support services, and for management. And in essence, I will oversee those groups. So I'm the kind of the glue that holds those together. And I will then, whilst overseeing the team itself, will also be part of the external liaison into international federations, BOA, BPA, and back into base as well. So that's structurally what it looks like. In terms of the way I kind of roll, Steve, is look, I always want to be the person that provides emotional stability, and I guess that's something that I hope people would see. Well, I don't tend to run very high or very very low. I mean, internally I run very high and very low, but externally, that's not the sort of emotion you will see from me. I don't feel that it's helpful in a leader to be somebody that is so overtly emotional, because again, probably back to my time as a swimming coach, I could go into a session of finals at a swim competition and have 4 or 5 athletes, and invariably you don't ever get what you want from every one of those performances. So I've always sort of been in a place of having to take highs and lows and balance those out in very short periods of time, and I think I'm pretty good at that now. Look, it may come across as though I'm cold at time, emotionless at time, but that's not what's churning, deep down. But it's the view of the world that I tend to put out there at major games time.
Yeah, well, you haven't invited my comment, but it feels like it's balanced, actually, more than that. It doesn't feel detached, it feels balanced. A degree of containment is super helpful. I can remember some of the conversations we had where actually I want to express some emotion or frustration, when actually if that's not mirrored back, that's okay, that's good, that calms me down, that can actually steady me. But in the same time, when maybe I haven't seen the opportunity, or I haven't necessarily seen that I need to push a bit harder, having some balance to see the other side of it was really helpful. That feels like it's a steadying but accelerating force at different times.
Absolutely. And Steve, look, again, I had my moment 36 years ago, so I did my thing at an Olympic Games in Seoul, and I look back at it through rose-tinted glasses, which is brilliant. I can remember all the great things. I don't remember any of the stuff that wasn't great. And I want every one of the athletes that's part of our aquatics GB teams to come away from Paris in this moment and just have had the best time. And I think my job is to help make that happen. But let's be honest with you, most of them will have an even better experience if the performances that they're looking for are performances they managed to produce. So when I talk about I want to support them to have a great time, that's not to be a happy clappy and isn't this wonderful. This is to deliver at the points in time that they've focused their lives to date on wanting to deliver. So that's what kind of drives me, and that's what I encourage all the staff to do as well.
And if I was to come into your team environment, what are the sort of team principles or team norms? Do you have a sense of some non-negotiables that you require of certainly the background team, but I presume also athletes? Is that something you communicate, or is that something you work on as a team?
I'm probably a little bit more sensitive now to the times to push and the times to pull, Steve. So look, I've been in my current role now for 2.5 years, but I didn't start with either of my sports at the beginning of a cycle. And in both instances, then I think we've made some progress. But are we necessarily where I would want us to be? I don't think we're absolutely where I'd want us to be at this point in time. But I think I've pushed the envelope, or we've moved the envelope as far as was reasonably practical within the time frame that we got. So I think if you were to come into my two sports, you'd actually feel and see something that was quite different. And I'm really comfortable with that. That's just conscious decision. There isn't a mould or a brand that it has to look like with every sport that I work with. I think you have to be very aware of the sporting nuances. Not least the fact that I've got one sport which is highly objective because you touch the wall at the end of the race, and I've got another sport which is a subjective sport. And again, all the lessons that I learned in gymnastics around politics and building reputation and people's perception of you is important as well, because judge sports operate in a very, very different way. So and the team staff operate in a very different way because of that as well. I'm mindful that you probably wouldn't see the same thing in my two sports, and equally if you were to walk into the swimming team, you'd see something at a different level of evolution again. And again, I'm not suggesting any better of evolution, but it's kind of horses for courses. The team staff are in the right place for their sport at this point in time of the cycle.
Yeah. Okay. So a nice flexible approach based on the culture, but also your entry point into that sport, and potentially the permissions that you've had to have some of those conversations in different ways along that time. That sounds like a suitable approach.
Steve, I found I was looking for some stuff for a presentation yesterday. I found some philosophical ramblings I'd written out for a presentation. This is probably, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago. I mean, it now looks incredibly dated in some ways. Some of the things that I thought were important then are things that I still believe are important. But it's a different world now in terms of how leaders and coaches can communicate those messages. It's much more difficult now to have a tough, critical conversation with athletes and members of staff as well. It's a different world that we live in. So my sort of my black and white view of the world, which you'd probably have seen 20 years ago, is probably quite different from the more understanding, more flexible view of the world that I kind of roll with now.
And could you just lean into that one? How do you ensure that standards stay high, but there is equal consideration for the person, their emotions, their feedback? Because I think I'm equally part of a generation that has had to evolve in the way that we work with people. It can't just be about that black and white statement, as you say. This is the standard. This is where you operate. And it was, we don't really care about how you respond type approach. How do you balance that, and how do you nurture that with your coaches?
We have to be good at understanding the generations of athletes that we're working with, and staff as well. Because I now have staff that are in some instances no older than some of the athletes that we're taking that considered approach with. I think the whole of the UK sporting system is probably still grappling with the whole issue of the importance of winning. The phrase and winning well, and the athlete experience as well, and how we set standards, but do that in a way which is received well by athletes as a challenge, and not seen as a criticism. And that's a really difficult thing to pull off now. One of my reflections recently about the past 10, 12 years of my career is that I probably spent, while I was in gymnastics, probably 80% of my time considering performance. There were performance challenges, there were performance questions, and that was where my time was spent. And 20% was stuff. I'm now dealing with 80% of stuff and how life impacts on sport, and that the amount of time I actually truly spend talking about performance has reduced massively. Now, that's been something that I've had to, work through as a leader and evolve my approach as well. Is it where I would want to be personally? Probably not, Steve. I do have quite a lot of days where I kind of wake up in the morning, look at what I've got to do within the day, and scratch my head and think, how on earth have I ended up here? This is not what I thought the gig was about. But I think to a reasonable extent, I've been able to evolve over the past, nearly 30 years that I've been involved in sport, not as an athlete, and hopefully I still remain just a little bit relevant. So.
And well, I mean the humility in your statement there shows that you are. But are you able to reconcile sorting stuff out with, I guess, your responsibility to also showcase the sport, create moments that really matter for people? Are you able to see the connection at all? Does one underpin the other, or are you getting distracted by the stuff? Is it not helping the performance program?
I get distracted by the stuff, Steve. I get distracted by it. I get frustrated by it. But it's not going to change. Okay. Look, look. If I use the statement, "the world that we live in," it seems to give the impression that I'm fighting against it. I'm not fighting against it. I'm constantly trying to find the areas that I can make an impact. Look, sometimes me making an impact is me dealing with some non-sporting stuff which makes somebody else in the performance program's life easier.
Yeah.
And I'm all good with that. But equally, look, we all want to go to work each day and have parts of our roles that are enjoyable. And the balance for me is trying to find it's that sort of fix of where do I want to be, because I know that's a really nice part of the job that I like to do. So I know I do still attend camps, I still go to a lot of competitions, I still go around and talk to coaches on poolside, because I really enjoy doing that sort of stuff, versus the stuff which is kind of sitting behind a desk shuffling paper, for want of a better phrase, which I can do, and I can do that pretty well as well, but it's just not the most enjoyable part of my job. I'm constantly reflecting on just how I get that balance better, and what are better ways of working.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, look, it's fascinating talking to you and hearing how not only you've evolved over time, but your philosophy underpinning your approaches has evolved. You've alluded to the post-Paris period a couple of times. Have you got a sense of what's some of the stuff that you want to do post Paris? Have you got a sense of still some work still to be done in terms of your mark, but also the changes that could potentially improve the sport, improve the impact of swimming, if it is swimming, on the wider world?
Yeah, Steve. Look, I think we all go, particularly those of us that work to Olympic Paralympic cycles with a definitive line in the sand, with a very public outcome which says the program's done well or it hasn't done well. We all take time to reflect. I personally and our business is encouraging people that are direct coalface members of staff in Paris to take a little bit more of an extended period of time off, which I think is brilliant for us. So I will personally literally do nothing for a month, and Steve, I need that. I need to probably do a little bit of reconnecting personally with my family as well, because they the decisions I make has implications on the people around me, and I'm the support I get from my close family is something I never take for granted. So I need to do that, and then sit down and be really honest and say, look, how can we move things forwards? One of the things I'll always say to my bosses, are we comfortable that I'm adding enough value to the business? Because look, I'm 57 now. I'm not a developing member of staff per se. I should be somebody that delivers now. I'm not somebody that needs a little bit of CPD here and there to make me a better leader. I kind of am what I am, and I expect myself to deliver, and I hope the business expects me to deliver as well. So we'll go through that period of reflection to go look, where are the gains that we think we can make? Have we got the resources to do that? Am I the right personality to do that? As we would do with other people in key roles as well, Steve. So again, I don't take it for granted that I'll be around in aquatics in 12 months' time. But but equally, I think if we decided there's some positive steps we could take forwards, then I'd love to be part of that journey again.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Well, it sounds like there's a very subtle difference there, but you recognise that maybe you're not developing, but you are a developer. That very
Correct.
question that you ask about, what could we do to move forward, is a strong stimulus and prompt for better, which for me has always been part of your character and what you experience when you're around you. I've always enjoyed your humble, pragmatic, self-reflective, but strong and balanced approach to performance. So
Yeah.
I'm wishing you all the best for Paris Olympics and Paralympics. I hope you have success, but also an incredible time as well with your team.
Brilliant. I appreciate your time this morning, Steve.